Hello, everyone, and welcome to the fifth week of the Sustained Seminar class. Today, we're going to be having a presentation on Ohio State's sustainability goals, and we'll also be talking about your projects at the end, so make sure to stay tuned to the whole thing. So what are the university sustainability goals? So Ohio State set sustainability goals in 2015 that covered a wide range of areas. The goal was basically to look at all the actions and reach of the university and figure out how do we embed sustainability into these areas and how do we really push our university to try to be better. So four main areas were identified: teaching and learning, research and innovation, outreach and engagement, and resource stewardship. So we're going to talk more about each of these areas, but you can see that already there's a lot of achievements that have kind of been achieved since the goals were set in 2015. The goals were set before the Sustainability Institute was formed, the institute that I work for that is now in charge of the goals. So some of them had to evolve over the years as we kind of figured out, what wasn't really working or what was a better target to be aiming for. But if anything, the goals have been accelerated since they were originally set, and a lot of progress has already been made to advance our university towards those goals. So the first area is teaching and learning. So what is teaching and learning? Teaching and learning is what's happening in the classroom. So things like this class, things like the EADS major, the Environment, Economy, Development, and Sustainability major, a major I know that many of you are enrolled in. For those of you who don't know, the EADS major is very interdisciplinary. There's really no equivalent at any other university currently. EADS works across a variety of departments, and it also contains social sciences, physical sciences, and business courses. And so that's a combination that really hasn't been replicated. And so it's quite an achievement for the university to have this major because it's so interdisciplinary and required collaboration across so many different units. So it's exciting to see these new programs forming that really focus on sustainability education. You can see there's over 1,200 courses that have a sustainability focus. That's in over 100 departments. So that means that programs that are not inherently sustainability focused are still embedding sustainability into different courses. And so, any student anywhere across the university really has the opportunity to study sustainability in their program. As far as next actions, what we're looking at, very excitingly, there's a new general education theme, a sustainability theme that's been proposed and is hopefully going to be accepted. So that means that students can choose to take a sustainability general education course while they're pursuing their degree. So that's very exciting that a larger number of students will be exposed to sustainability lessons throughout their coursework. So here you can see some additional teaching and learning initiatives. These are initiatives that the Institute itself is working on. As I mentioned, the Sustainability Institute is in charge of keeping track of the goals, but we're also working to implement new programs and efforts to make progress towards the goals. So some of the things we've done some education abroad support for sustainability themes, try to make it more accessible to doing a sustainability focused education abroad. We have some project grants that are available. I'll be sharing information with you all about that when it launches, but you do not need to apply for a project grant for the Sustain's final project, so don't worry about that. We also do some scholarships, not directly through the Institute. We sponsor other units to hold sustainability scholarships, so nothing that you all could really apply for. But some of you may have earned one of those scholarships. So we're also looking at expanding curriculum. So the Sustainability Institute is directly involved with that new general education, sustainability general education that is being rolled out. So the next area is research and innovation. And so when we're looking at that, we're really talking about generating new sustainability knowledge, and that can be accomplished through research. Obviously, the university is privileged to have an incredible wealth of brain power here. And so really we're trying to figure out how do we focus all this amazing knowledge and innovation power that we have here at the university to really try to create some new sustainability improvements. So you can see there's over 500 faculty and researchers conducting sustainability research. A ton of money has been awarded to the university to pursue this research. And our next action is we're working to establish an Energy Advancement and Innovation Center. It's really going to be a hub for sustainability innovation, bringing together people from a wide variety of disciplines to work on creating advances in energy. So very exciting. Here's some more initiatives that the Institute is doing. So some of you who are involved in research may eventually present at the Denman Symposium. And so we award undergraduate students who are demonstrating high levels of sustainability research at the Denman. We also, again, have those student grants, and I am working on some Living Lab stuff. For those of you who don't know, Living Lab means utilizing our campus resources and natural spaces to create experiential learning opportunities for students. So for example, Mirror Lake, there's some really interesting research there happening around algal blooms. And so we're utilizing our campus in a really unique and interesting way to create a learning opportunity that's also generating new sustainability knowledge that can be applied in other situations. So Living Lab is really leveraging the resources we have at the university to create these opportunities. Next is outreach and engagement. So what does this mean? This means working with partners. You know, the university collaborates with a lot of different units, and obviously our campuses have a big impact on the communities they're set in. So we're trying to figure out not only how do we achieve our own sustainability goals, but how do we help these other communities and stakeholders achieve their sustainability goals. So some of these things are collaborating with groups like Smart Columbus, who you may be aware of. We helped Columbus set a climate action plan. The Mansfield campus has a micro farm that's really interesting, is helping embed urban farms into different cities around Columbus or around Ohio. We've served on the Sustainable Columbus Advisory Board. And upcoming, I'm kind of blocking it a little bit with my image there, but the Midwest Higher Education Climate Summit is very exciting. And so that's an initiative that's been in development for a few years now. And this October, November, there's going to be some cool virtual opportunities with that climate summit. And I'll make sure to spread the word about those once we have some more details, but it's very exciting for that to be developing. So the rest of the sustainability goals fall under this broad lens of resource stewardship. So resource stewardship is really what people think when I say the word sustainability. It's things like waste diversion, it's things like energy efficiency. And so the university has a number of goals set in this area. So we'll dive more into them, but they are the university fleet's carbon footprint, reducing that by 25%, achieving carbon neutrality by 2050, increasing the amount of locally sourced food we serve on campus, increasing our ecosystem services, which I'll explain more, trying to reduce the amount of drinking water or potable water that we use, achieving zero waste, which is diverting waste from landfills, reducing our building energy consumption, and helping identify preferred products, so environmentally or products that are less environmentally harmful that we can prioritize purchasing over other products. So we're going to dive into some of these here. But the first one is the Resource Stewardship Goal 7A. It's achieve carbon neutrality by 2050. And so that's a university-wide footprint that's looking at all our campuses. And some people get hung up on the word neutrality, but what that really means is that we're not aiming to have zero emissions. So that does not mean that there won't be any carbon produced because of our campus operations. What that means instead is that we're going to reduce our carbon emissions as much as possible, and for everything that we can't reduce, we're going to create programs that sequester carbon. So you know when you plant a tree, it sequesters a certain amount of carbon from the atmosphere. So we're going to be doing initiatives like that to ensure that every ton of carbon that we produce, we are having some kind of program that offsets a ton of carbon from the environment. And so that way we can achieve carbon neutrality by 2050. This is one of our earliest goals. It was established in 2008, and we've really hit some historically terrible numbers since 2008. So if you're aware of what's happening out in Oregon right now, the amount of carbon particulates that are in that air it's becoming unbreathable out there because of the fires. But globally, we're over 415 parts per million of atmospheric carbon, which is unprecedented in the history of the world. And so obviously we're reaching a tipping point as far as climate action is concerned. Luckily on our campus, we have a center called the Bird Center, which is the Polar and Climate Research Center. They're doing some incredible work, and they're working on trying to figure out how do we avoid potentially disastrous climate impacts from occurring, and what kind of programs can universities like Ohio State be doing to try to reduce the amount of carbon they're producing. So one thing that's really important when we talk about climate action is how quickly we respond. And so we're aiming to have a 45% reduction by 2030. And that matches with what's being recommended at a national and global level because if the longer it takes to reduce the amount of carbon that we're producing, just the more and more carbon we're pumping into the air. And eventually we're going to reach these environmental tipping points where essentially we can't go back and we can't fix the damage we're going to cause. And so we really have to prioritize trying to reduce our carbon as quickly as possible. And so what's considered a goal for the entire world is to try to hit the net zero carbon emissions by 2050, and that's the goal that our university is pursuing. So in 2011, the university set a climate action plan, and already we've seen some pretty significant changes. So overall, we've had emissions go down since then, so a 15.2% decrease in carbon emissions, even though we've increased our built landscape by 10.9%. So there's 10.9% more buildings and floor space on campus, but we still managed to reduce our carbon despite of that. We are currently purchasing 14% of our electricity from a wind farm, kind of located in northern Ohio, and so that's very exciting. And we've seen a 4% increase in our building efficiency just since 2017. So we're already seeing a lot of significant changes here in helping reduce carbon emissions. For those of you who are unfamiliar with how carbon footprints are calculated, there's essentially 3 scopes that people talk about. So scope 1 is direct emissions. So you may be familiar with the McCracken power plant that's located on campus. That burns gas to produce steam that heats the water. So if you're living in the dorms, the hot water that comes out of the shower, that's because of McCracken. And so a little under 30% of our total emissions are coming from these scope 1 emissions, which are direct emissions from burning things like natural gas, things we basically do on campus. Scope 2 emissions are indirect emissions. So that's things like purchased electricity. That's a little over 40% of our total emissions. So even though 14% of our power is coming from wind, in Ohio, most of the energy mix is coming from coal. And so the university is trying to figure out how do we reduce the amount of non-renewable electricity we're purchasing, but we still, just because of the state we're in, have to purchase a large amount of coal-powered electricity. And so we're seeing a lot of emissions coming from that indirect. Scope 3 is related emissions. So that's a little under 30% of our total emissions. And basically when someone commutes to campus, or when we fly when we bus our football team to some conference game, all those emissions are captured in this calculation. And so that makes up about 30% of our total emissions. And we're really, this is an area that's really difficult to get down because we have a lot of control over scope 1 and scope 2, but scope 3 is really about people and the decisions that people make. So how do we get less people to drive to work? How do we get more people to bike to work? How do we encourage less air travel? So these are the kinds of challenges that are really difficult to figure out and are going to require a lot of help from everyday people to really help us achieve our goal of being carbon neutral by 2050. So you can see our total emissions up there are just right below 620,000 tons, which is an enormous amount to be producing. And so obviously the university has a big responsibility to figure out how to reduce that number. So you can see here kind of where our emission mix is coming from. So the largest is that purchased electricity section. And feel free to check this out. There's no need. I'll post these slides, but there's no need to study these too closely. But if it's of interest to any of you, you can kind of see where we're seeing our largest carbon impacts coming from. So this is an acceleration outline. What that really means is this is how we're going to meet our goal. So we have a variety of actions that we're going to take, and each of those actions has a related reduction in carbon and a related percentage decrease in our carbon footprint. All these things are going to cost something, so we have to figure out how to pay for it. We have to figure out what timeline we can implement these in, because again, time is very important when we're talking about carbon. And there's some additional, benefits to many of these projects beyond just reducing carbon. So again, feel free to check this slide out, but it would be more for personal interest. There's no need to memorize any of this for any class reason. So our third goal, goal C, is to reduce potable water consumption by 5% every 5 years. And so what does this mean? Again, potable just means drinking water. And when we say reduce our water consumption by 5%, that's a per capita. So per every gallon of water that the average person uses on our campus, we're trying to reduce that number by 5%. So those of you who are living in a dorm, that's all the water you use to shower, to wash your hands, to do your laundry, all these things. We're trying to figure out how do we get that number down by 5% every 5 years. And so this goal is just going to keep compounding and compounding and compounding until we eventually see some significant reductions on our campus. So this goal is actually doing very, very well. We found a lot of opportunities to reduce this number significantly. So you can already see that we've reduced our drinking water use by nearly 23% in just a few years. So that's 24 million gallons saved, and that's done with simple things, with just like low flow fixtures, leak fixes, building water audits. One thing that's really cool is with the College of Pharmacy Research Lab. So they have a piece of lab equipment that utilizes drinking water. Normally it utilizes drinking water to create a vacuum, but we were able to invest in a technology that would reuse water rather than just using water once and dumping it. And that's going to save over 15 million gallons, which is incredible. And it only took 8 months to see a return on that investment. So the initial cost, within 8 months, it was refunded by the amount of water we were saving. So these are the kind of opportunities that we're looking to identify to help us really reach these goals, is these low-hanging fruit, high-impact projects that make a lot of financial sense to undertake. Unfortunately, a lot of these goals are going to require us to, look beyond just those low-hanging fruit and really identify some big structural changes we're going to have to make as a university, but we definitely don't want to miss any of these easy opportunities along the way. So research goal 70, it's increase campus ecosystem services by 60%. That's a confusing sentence. And so if you don't understand it, what that basically means is just when we talk about ecosystem services, what we're talking about is the benefits that nature and humans receive from natural spaces. And so when you think about a tree, not only is a tree beautiful and can raise property values, but it's also producing oxygen. It's helping prevent erosion. It's doing all these things that give a benefit to nature and humans, and those benefits can often be captured in a monetary sense, but they often can't be captured in a monetary sense. What's the financial benefit of a nice tree to swing a hammock from? That's hard to articulate, but obviously there's a benefit to that. I think many people would agree. So we were challenged as a university to try to figure out how do we make sure that we're making progress towards this goal when so much of this is unquantifiable. And so the Ecosystem Services Index was developed. This is really the first of its kind in a university setting. There's no university that's replicated an effort like this. And what it does is it figures out all the benefits that we receive from our green spaces. So recreation, clean air, stormwater management, all these benefits we get from green spaces. It figures out a way to quantify them. And that way we can then try to pursue that goal of increasing all these services by 60%. So a very clear example of this is the Mirror Lake restoration. For those of you who have never been to Mirror Lake, I highly recommend go visit it sometime. But if you look at pictures from a few years ago, it looked very, very different. And so it used to essentially be a big swimming pool, but now it's a much more natural space that is using groundwater instead of city water. Clean, distilled city water was being pumped into this outdoor pool, basically, and it was a huge waste of water. But now we've really changed the space and made it a much more pleasing and beneficial natural environment for people and for nature. So these kinds of restoration efforts are helping us achieve this goal of increasing our campus ecosystem services. There's some pictures of the restored Mirror Lake. So goal 7F is achieving zero waste by 2025. So what this means is diverting 90% of landfill waste. So sometimes when I say zero waste, people are like, well, shouldn't we be aiming for 100%? And it would be great if we never threw anything into a landfill ever again. But unfortunately, with current technology, it's just not very achievable. When we look at stuff that's coming out of the Wexner Medical Center that's toxic and biohazardous, there's just nothing we can do with that material except dispose of it as safely as possible. And that often requires a landfill or other specialized disposal area. And so the way the world works right now, we'll never be able to achieve 100%, but we can still aim for that 90% diversion, which would be a huge change from how we currently operate. So luckily, we've increased our diversion rate to 31%. We're still below the national diversion rate. Ohio is not very good at diverting waste. We're very low when looked at other states around the country. So we're definitely challenged by the resources we have in the central Ohio area. One big thing that we've achieved is on game days, we've achieved a 90% diversion rate. So when you go to an Ohio State football game, hopefully in the spring sometime, maybe in October, we are seeing these waste diversion programs that have been highly successful. And so if you go in the stadium, you won't find a trash can in any of the main fan areas. Instead, it's all composting and all recycling. And so we've worked with all the vendors that sell goods in the stadium and made sure that they're only giving fans things that can be recycled or composted. And so that way, we just have to have those two things available, those two bins available. We just have to educate people on what goes in which bin, and then we can make sure that essentially everything coming out of the stadium doesn't have to go to the landfill. A lot of other universities are now challenging us in this area, so it's really exciting to see some other universities stepping up their waste diversion programs, and now there's some cool competition that happens between our school during the football season, not just about what's happening on the field. Another thing we've done is a hand dryer conversion, so some of you may feel not so great about this, some of you may really like this, but in Scott, they replaced a lot of the paper towel dispensers with hand dryers. And paper towels alone make up 8.5% of the university waste stream. That's almost 9% of our waste stream is just from one source. And so switching to hand dryers is obviously a huge investment. And it's also helping reduce in plumbing clogs. People, for whatever reason I'll never understand, flush paper towels down toilets and clog them into sinks, and that causes a ton of damage every year. And so hand dryers avoid that entirely. And so we're seeing a huge benefit from that. We still have a very long way to go to achieve this goal. This is probably one of the hardest goals for us to achieve, but it's very exciting to be engaging in this space. So those are the Ohio State sustainability goals. I didn't go over all the resource stewardship goals just because some of them are frankly just not quite as interesting as others, but if you ever have any questions about them, I'd be happy to talk further. If you're interested in reading more about the campus sustainability goals, I attached a link in this module, and so you can check it out. And again, let me know if you have any questions. For now, I just wanted to talk about the final project. So you all have completed part one of your project. Great job. You did the brainstorming, you attached your name to a project, or you pitched your own project, so that's fantastic. I will be assigning groups, and you all will be put into a group. If you're not put into a group, let me know, but I should be able to sort everybody to a group as so long as you put your name on the brainstorming sheet. And those will be your final project group. So that'll be the group of students that you're working to achieve your goal of creating a proposal for this project idea that you all brainstormed. So this week, like I said in the module, there's no actual activity or discussion that you have to post to. Instead, what I want you to do is get together with your group and start working. You do not need to do this in person. All this can be done virtually. If you and your group are comfortable doing it in person, then that's a choice you all can make. But you are certainly not expected to meet in person if you are not comfortable with that. But I would like you all to start working on your projects now. The next part will be due on October 13th. Part 2 is just a real simple summary of the direction that you're planning on going and a list of who you're planning on contacting. So last week's module was all about identifying campus resources. And so now for this next part of your project, you can use that list of campus resources that people put together to figure out, okay, who is relevant for my project, and try to figure out who you may need to contact to get your project implemented, were your classmates to vote on it. I laid out also the rest of the project parts into a final project module, so I encourage you to check that out. We are slowly going to be working towards putting together a presentation, but that's not going to be due until November, and we'll be releasing more information about that as we get closer. But just make sure to check out what you'll need to be including in your presentation as you and your group start figuring out what your project's going to look like. I also encourage you to check out the rubric that I posted so you can see how you're going to be graded. And so just make sure you keep that rubric in mind as you put together your presentation. The final project's out of 20. It's pretty rare for someone to get a 20 out of 20, but again, you can make up for points lost in the final project category by getting extra points in the events, activities, and analysis. So do an extra analysis, attend an extra event, and then you don't have to be worried about failing the class if you lose a point or two in the final project. Most people do pretty well, but it's pretty rare for anyone to get a perfect score on the final project. I do want to make it clear, the way the final projects will work is that near the end of November, you all will be presenting your projects to me. I will be recording your presentations and then posting them where your classmates can view them. Then everyone will view all the group presentations. You will vote on which project ideas you want to most implement in the spring, and then we as a community will work on implementing those projects that were voted highest. And so as you put your project together, definitely be thinking about, what's feasible, what can we accomplish in a semester or two, and also what's going to be impactful for the university, what's going to be something that's going to make a lasting change. I will say right now, I'll reiterate this as we get closer to the presentations, but just because your project doesn't get chosen to be implemented does not mean it's a bad project by any means. Normally we see a lot of really great projects, and the reason we vote as a class to decide on which 2 or 3 projects we're going to implement in the spring is just because it makes it much more likely that those projects will be implemented. If we have 5 or 6 really great ideas and we exhaust ourselves trying to put those 5 or 6 ideas into place and then we don't really achieve anything in any of those areas, then that's not as impactful as if we focus our whole community and all our resources and efforts behind 2 or 3 projects. So just keep that in mind. Again, the presentations are way off, but you can check out the whole module on the Carmen page, and I'll be going through that in a later presentation. But again, for now, for this week, there's no required activity. You just needed to view this video and then start meeting with your group and start working towards that part 2 assignment, and be keeping that in mind. That's going to be due on October 13th. So thank you all for viewing. Let me know if you have any questions. If you have a question, please use the course Q&A rather than sending me an email or a group me, just because that allows other people to see your question and benefit from the answer. And that way I don't have to spend too much time answering similar questions. But if you have a more personal question or something not directly related to class, you're always welcome to email or send me a group me message, or I'd be happy to set up a meeting for us to chat. But thank you all for listening. I appreciate your time. Let me know if you have any questions, and I will look forward to talking with you all soon. All right, have a good week. Bye-bye, everyone.